The wind was sharp that evening, brushing past buildings and scattering dried leaves across the streets of downtown Seattle. The air carried that faint scent of rain that always came before winter. Emma pulled her scarf tighter around her neck as she stepped out of the office building, her breath rising in small clouds. It had been a long day, the kind that left her thinking too much. She crossed the street and walked toward her favorite cafe, hoping a warm cup of coffee would chase away the chill that had settled deep inside her. Inside, the cafe was glowing with soft yellow lights and smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon. It felt like a small escape from the cold world outside. She took her usual seat near the window, her fingers wrapped around the warm cup. The glass was fogged from the difference in temperature, and through the blur of passing cars and people, she spotted a figure that made her heartbeat skip. She blinked once, unsure if her mind was playing tricks on her. But when the man pushed the door open and stepped in, she froze. It was Liam. He looked almost the same, maybe a little older, his hair shorter, his jawline more defined. He scanned the cafe for a moment before his eyes landed on her. For a second, neither of them moved. Then he smiled, the same kind of smile that used to make her feel safe. "Emma," he said, his voice gentle, almost uncertain. She managed a small nod. "Hey, Liam." He sat across from her, and for a few seconds they just stared at each other, unsure where to start. It had been nearly 3 years since they had last spoken. 3 years since she had walked away from something that had felt right, but ended wrong. "You still come here?" he said, glancing around. "Yeah," she replied, her fingers tightening around her cup. "Some things don't change." He smiled softly. "Some things do." They talked for a while, not about the past, but about everything else. Work, travel, life. They laughed awkwardly at moments that felt too close to the truth, and both avoided the topic that hung quietly between them. Emma noticed the small details, the way his eyes still crinkled when he smiled, the way he stirred his coffee exactly 3 times before taking a sip. It was strange how familiar he still felt. Outside, the wind picked up. Through the window, they watched as a few drops of rain began to fall, making tiny ripples on the pavement. "It's getting colder," Emma said, standing up and pulling her coat tighter. Liam followed her out. The night had grown even more biting, the streets shining under the wet reflections of city lights. Emma shivered and laughed softly. "I forgot how cold Seattle can get." Liam looked at her, his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. "There's a new bathhouse just a few blocks from here," he said. "They have steam rooms and hot pools. Maybe we should go warm up before we both freeze." She laughed, surprised by his sudden suggestion. "A bathhouse? You mean right now?" He nodded, smiling. "Why not? It's not far, and you look like you could use a little warmth." Emma hesitated for a moment. It sounded innocent enough, but there was something about the way he said it, the easy tone, the gentle smile, that made her heart stir. The old comfort between them was still there, hidden beneath the years that had passed. "All right," she said finally, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Lead the way." They walked side by side down the quiet street, their steps echoing softly against the wet pavement. The city lights painted their faces in flashes of gold and silver. For a while, neither spoke, but it wasn't awkward. It was as if they both knew that words weren't needed. The silence between them felt calm, full of something familiar and warm. As they reached the corner, Emma caught a glimpse of the small bathhouse sign glowing faintly in the distance. It looked cozy, steam rising from its roof like a promise of comfort. The sight made her smile without meaning to. "You really weren't kidding," she said. "I told you," Liam replied, holding the door open for her. "Sometimes you just need a little heat to remember what warmth feels like." Inside, the air was instantly different. Soft, humid, carrying a faint scent of lavender. It wrapped around her like a blanket after a long winter. She could hear the quiet bubbling of water and the low hum of relaxation in the background. Everything felt calm and far away from the outside world. Emma looked at Liam, and for a brief second, she saw the boy she used to know, the one who made her laugh on rainy days and promised her that not all endings had to be sad. He caught her gaze and smiled, a quiet understanding passing between them. Maybe it was the steam, or maybe it was the fact that after years of distance, fate had led them to this exact moment. Either way, something inside Emma shifted. The cold she had carried for so long didn't feel quite as heavy anymore, as they moved deeper into the warmth. She realized how strange and beautiful life could be. How two people could drift apart and still find their way back. Not by planning, but by chance. That night, as the world outside stayed cold and distant, Emma felt something she hadn't in years, a quiet kind of peace. She didn't know what would happen next. But for now, the warmth of the place, the sound of water, and Liam's familiar presence were enough. The evening that started with cold winds and silence had led to something unexpected, a moment that felt like a beginning, though neither of them had called it that yet. And as she looked around the softly lit bathhouse, Emma couldn't help but think, maybe some stories don't end. They just pause, waiting for the right time to begin again. The moment Emma stepped inside the bathhouse, the world outside faded away. Warm steam floated through the air, carrying the light scent of lavender and cedarwood. The chill from the street melted off her skin as she followed Liam down a hallway, lined with soft lights. Everything felt calm, too calm. The gentle sound of trickling water echoed through the space, and the warmth touched her like a quiet reminder of how long it had been since she felt this at ease. Liam glanced back at her, smiling in that way that still felt familiar. See? Better than freezing outside. Emma smiled faintly. You always knew how to convince me. They changed into robes and stepped into the main room. The steam rose in soft waves, blurring the light and making everything look dreamlike. Pools of warm water glimmered under soft lamps and people sat quietly, lost in their own thoughts. Emma dipped her feet into one of the smaller pools and let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The warmth sank into her bones, loosening the tension that had built over years of pretending she was fine. Liam sat beside her, leaning back against the wooden wall. For a while, neither spoke. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt awkward. It was the kind that carried history. The kind that said, I remember you, without needing words. You still hate the cold, he said finally, his voice breaking through the quiet. She smiled softly. Always have. I used to tell you that winter wasn't made for people like me. He chuckled, looking into the water. You said that the first time we went out together. You were wearing that red scarf you loved. Emma turned her head toward him. You remember that? I remember everything, he said simply. The words hung between them, soft and heavy. The sound of the bubbling water seemed to grow louder, filling the silence his confession left behind. Emma looked down, her reflection broken by ripples in the pool. She wasn't sure what to say. So much had changed between them, but right now, sitting here, it felt like nothing had. They moved to another room, a small steam chamber lined with cedar benches. The air was warm and misty, almost like being inside a cloud. Emma closed her eyes, breathing in slowly, trying to calm the rush of feelings stirring inside her. Liam sat across from her, watching her quietly. You seem quieter than before, he said. She opened her eyes and looked at him. I'm just thinking about us, he asked carefully. Her lips curved into a small, sad smile. You always did know how to read me. He looked down for a moment, his voice soft. You left without saying goodbye. That night, I didn't even know what to think. Emma's chest tightened. It wasn't because I stopped caring. I just didn't know how to stay when everything felt like it was falling apart. Liam's eyes softened. I know. I wasn't any better. I kept thinking I'd call, that I'd fix things. But pride got in the way. The steam thickened between them, and the warmth felt heavier now. Not just on their skin, but inside their hearts. It was strange, sitting across from the person who had once been everything, realizing how much had been left unsaid. After a long pause, Emma whispered, I never stopped wondering how you were. He smiled faintly. You could have asked. I didn't think you'd want to hear from me. He shook his head. I would have answered. Every time. The honesty in his voice hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't dramatic or loud, just simple, real. It reminded her why she had fallen for him in the first place. He had always been steady, genuine, the kind of man who meant what he said. They sat there for a while longer, saying nothing, letting the warmth and the silence speak for them. Outside the chamber, someone laughed faintly, a sound distant but grounding, reminding them that the world was still turning, that life had gone on. When they finally stepped back into the open room, Emma's hair was damp, her skin flushed with heat. She felt lighter somehow, as if part of the weight she had carried for years had been left behind in that cloud of steam. Liam handed her a towel, their fingers brushing lightly. It was a small touch, but it sent a familiar spark through her, the kind she had almost forgotten. Their eyes met briefly, and for a heartbeat, it felt like time had folded in on itself, like they were back in the days when everything was still possible. They found a quiet corner near a window, where the night sky peeked through the fogged glass. The snow outside looked soft and endless, and the contrast between the freezing world and the warmth around them made Emma's chest ache in a strange, comforting way. You know, Liam said softly, it's funny. I've been in this city for years, but it never really felt like home after you left. Emma looked at him, her eyes gentle. Maybe you just needed a reason to feel like home again. Their gazes held for a long time, and in that moment the years between them seemed to disappear. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not completely, but it was something close, something beginning. A soft song started playing through the speakers, slow and melodic. It took Emma only a few seconds to recognize it. It was their song, the one they used to play on late drives by the coast, windows down, hands intertwined. She froze, and so did Liam. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Of course this song would find us again, he said quietly. Emma's throat tightened as memories flooded back. Nights filled with laughter, small promises and love that had once felt endless. She looked at him, her voice trembling slightly. Maybe it's not trying to find us. Maybe it's just reminding us. He nodded, his gaze never leaving hers, reminding us of what still matters. The song played softly in the background. The steam curled gently around them, and for the first time in a long while, Emma felt her heart open, not to the past, but to the possibility of something new. The warmth in the air wasn't just from the bathhouse anymore. It was from two hearts that had found their way back to the same place, even if they didn't yet know where it would lead. The snow outside had started to fall heavier, wrapping the city in soft silence. Inside the bathhouse lounge, everything was calm. The lights dim, the air warm, and a soft melody playing in the background. Emma sat on a wooden bench near the window, holding a cup of herbal tea between her palms. The steam rose gently, curling into the air. Across from her, Liam sat with his head leaned back, eyes closed, looking more peaceful than she remembered. For a moment, she just watched him, wondering how time could change everything and still leave some things untouched. They had spent the past hour in quiet rooms filled with mist, talking about small things. His job, her new apartment, the city. But now, sitting in the silence, the words they had been avoiding pressed harder between them. Emma wanted to say something, but her throat felt tight. She didn't know how to begin. Finally, she spoke softly. "Do you ever think about the past?" Liam opened his eyes slowly, his gaze meeting hers. "Every now and then," he said. "But I try not to stay there too long." Emma smiled faintly. "I guess I never really left." He looked at her carefully, as if trying to read what she wasn't saying. "You mean us?" She nodded, her eyes falling to her cup. "It's strange, isn't it? We spent so much time trying to move on, pretending we were fine. But sitting here now, it feels like no time has passed." Liam leaned forward, his voice calm but heavy. "I know. There were so many things I wanted to tell you back then. But I was too proud. I thought if I stayed silent, it would hurt less." Emma's laugh was soft, a little sad. "You weren't the only one. I thought if I pretended to be strong, I'd stop missing you." He looked down for a moment, then said, "I missed you anyway." The honesty in his tone made something ache deep inside her. She had waited years to hear those words, but now that she had, she didn't know what to do with them. "I kept thinking," she said quietly, "what if we had just talked instead of walking away? What if one of us had stayed?" Liam sighed, running his hand through his hair. "Maybe we weren't ready then. Maybe we both needed to learn what love costs when you take it for granted." The snow outside kept falling, soft and endless. The world beyond the window looked frozen in time, but inside, Emma felt warmth she hadn't felt in years. There was something peaceful about the honesty between them now. No anger, no blame, just two people trying to understand what had been lost and what could still be found. "I tried dating," Emma said after a long pause, "but no one ever felt like you." Liam looked at her, his voice low. Maybe because no one ever was. Their eyes met, and for a moment, everything around them disappeared. The sound of water, the low music, even the distant laughter from another room. It was just them, caught in a silence that said everything words couldn't. Then the soft chime of a clock broke the stillness. An attendant passed by, gently reminding everyone that closing time was soon. Emma looked away, breaking the gaze that had held her still. She felt her chest tighten. She didn't want this night to end. "Not yet." Liam stood and put his cup down. "It's late," he said quietly. "We should probably go." Emma nodded, but her heart felt heavy. She didn't want to lose the warmth that had grown between them tonight. As they walked toward the locker area, the hallways were nearly empty. The air was filled with the scent of eucalyptus and steam. It felt like walking through a dream, one that would fade once the cold air outside touched their skin. Again, Dot at the door. Liam hesitated. "Emma," he said, turning to face her. His eyes were calm but searching. "Do you think there's still something between us?" Her breath caught. She wanted to say yes, but fear made her hesitate. She had learned to protect her heart, to build walls around it. But tonight, those walls had started to crack. "I don't know," she whispered honestly, "but I still feel something when I'm with you. I don't know what it means anymore." Liam took a slow breath. "Maybe we don't have to name it. Maybe we just see where it leads." She wanted to believe that people could find their way back after years apart. But before she could answer, the attendant appeared again, reminding them kindly that it was time to leave. Emma smiled weakly and nodded. "We should go." They walked out into the cold night together. The snow had stopped, leaving a soft white layer over everything. The air was crisp and still. Liam's breath came out in faint clouds, and his voice broke the quiet. "You know," he said, "I almost didn't go into that cafe today." Emma glanced at him, her heart skipping. "What made you?" He smiled faintly. "A feeling. Like maybe something unfinished was waiting for me there." She didn't answer, but her eyes softened. Maybe fate really did have its strange ways of bringing people back together. They stood on the corner, the warm light of the bathhouse glowing behind them. Emma could feel the night pressing in, urging them to part ways. Liam looked at her one last time. "It was good seeing you again," he said. She smiled, though her eyes glistened. "You too." He turned to walk away, and she stood there watching him go. The man who had once been her home, now a familiar stranger fading into the snowy night. For a long moment she didn't move. The world around her was silent, but her heart felt loud, filled with all the words she still hadn't said. And though she didn't know what tomorrow would bring, she knew one thing: some connections don't end when people walk away. They wait, quietly, for the right time to be found again. The night outside the bathhouse was cold enough to make Emma's breath turn white. The snow had stopped, but the air still carried that frozen silence that comes only after a long winter evening. She walked beside Liam down the quiet street, their footsteps leaving two thin trails behind them. The city lights glowed softly on the wet pavement, and the sound of a distant train echoed faintly through the night. Neither of them spoke for a while. There was too much inside their hearts, and words suddenly felt too fragile to hold it all. The warmth from the bathhouse still lingered on their skin, and for the first time in years, Emma didn't feel the cold biting through her coat. She felt calm, almost peaceful. Liam's voice finally broke the silence. "It's strange," he said, looking ahead, "how something as simple as running into you can make everything feel right again." Emma smiled faintly, her eyes following the soft glow of streetlights. "I was thinking the same thing. It's like the world wanted us to meet again, just to remind me that not everything stays broken." He glanced at her, his eyes full of quiet warmth. Maybe some things aren't meant to stay broken. Maybe they just take time to heal. She didn't respond, but her heart stirred at his words. For so long, she had convinced herself that what they once had was gone, buried under years of silence and mistakes. But tonight had reminded her that feelings, the real ones, don't vanish. They just wait. They reached the corner of the street where they had to part ways. Emma looked up and saw the snow piled softly on the rooftops, glowing under the streetlight. Liam turned to her, his expression gentle but uncertain. "So?" he said quietly. "Does this mean goodbye again?" Emma hesitated, her breath catching in the cold air. She wanted to say something clever, something that didn't sound as vulnerable as she felt. But she couldn't hide anymore. "I don't want it to be," she said softly. His eyes met hers, and the look they shared said more than any apology could. "Then maybe it doesn't have to be," he said. "We could start slow, just talk. Coffee, maybe dinner. Nothing complicated." She smiled, a real smile this time, the kind she hadn't felt in years. "You're still terrible at being casual." He laughed quietly. "Maybe I am, but I'm not ready to walk away again." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. She nodded, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "Then let's not," she whispered. The wind swept between them, carrying the faint scent of snow and city rain. For a moment they just stood there, not touching, not speaking, only feeling the weight of the moment, the quiet magic of a second chance. Liam reached out gently, brushing a snowflake from her hair. His touch was light,